Today, I sit down with Carrie. She's from the US and she shares with us her journey of getting into a relationship that went from being absolutely wonderful to absolutely awful. It started off with subtle emotional abuse and it escalated to subtle physical abuse, like pushing, to sexual abuse. And she shares with us the things to look out for and just how hard it was to get right in her head what was going on. It took her a long time to realize that this wasn't her fault and there was nothing she could do to change this behavior that her partner was exhibiting. And she talks about how she finally left after at least 7 tries and what to do to make sure you are safe, to put a plan in place if you are in this experience, to safely leave. Enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome, Carrie. How you doing today?
And I'm so excited to be here. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's been such a beautiful weekend here in London. It's felt like almost like a dream how sunny it's been for this time of year. How about you? Where are you based?
We have similar weather. So any day that there's sunshine, it's like we're outside, we're in it, living our
Yeah.
best life. I think our weather is like pretty similar to y'all, where it's, on a sunny day, everyone's outside. You're like, oh my gosh, people live here. I haven't seen you in 6 months. It's just been raining.
It's actually so true. And it feels like so much like you just enjoy it so much more. Like you don't take it for granted. The worst though is when it's those days and you have to work and you're like, why?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about yourself. So you're married, you've got a little baby, I think.
I
Yeah.
do. Yeah. We have a little boy named Lincoln. He's our IVF rainbow miracle baby. He just turned 7 months old and like had the biggest week ever. He got his first tooth and he started crawling this week.
Oh
So
wow.
we need all the vibes and all the like positivity over here because things are changing.
Oh wow. Well, congratulations. The
Yeah.
IVF must have been like taken a long time then.
A crazy journey. Yeah, we'd been
Yeah.
trying for 5 years. And I mean, the more you learn just about the science and all the things, I mean, it's just incredible. I mean, life is a miracle when it's able to happen that way.
Yes.
It's just incredible. So
Yeah.
yeah, but I'm married to the greatest guy in the world and named Joey. And yeah, life is it's just a really sweet season right now.
Good. Shout out to Joey and Lincoln. Any
Yeah.
any animals? Any
Oh yeah, we've got two fur babies, Fitz and Phoenix, and they are like loving the kiddo. And especially now that he's starting to eat solids, they're like, "We see your purpose. This is why we're home. It was to."
It was to drop things on the floor for us.
Yeah.
Got it. So I really appreciate you coming on today. I think it would be great to your past from what I've learned and we'll get into is you found yourself in a relationship that became emotionally abusive, then physical, and then sexual. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, just pick a category of abuse, and it was present. So
Wow. Would you share how you first met this person and how this came to be?
yeah, I was actually in a different relationship at the time. And in hindsight, that wasn't a very healthy relationship either. But I had no paradigm growing up for what abuse actually looked like. And
Mm.
so, the thing is, it's kind of like the lobster boiling in the pot. You don't realize things are boiling until you're literally being cooked. And so, that relationship, things were falling apart. Everything was not so great. And then this guy came along and it was sort of like he was the knight in shining armor. And, whereas my ex was, his words were embarrassed of me because I wasn't perfect, this guy was super proud of me and like couldn't wait to, treat me well and wanted to introduce me to people and wanted me to be a part of things. And it just seemed like it was too good to be true, which often means it is. And so I met him through a mutual friend who she knew his friend. So it wasn't like anyone really knew him, but they worked together and he had come along to hang out. And so that was how we met. And it started very quickly after that. And really before I knew it, that, Prince Charming veneer had started to shift.
Yeah. And I, from the research that I've done, from your background, what you were saying was, would you share about how you felt in high school that like you felt like you were undesirable, and here was this man desiring you. Can you share a bit more about that?
I think for so many of us, high school are not the best years of our life, even though we get told that they should be. And I was one of those people. They were not my best years. I was not very well liked in high school. I had some people, I mean, they vandalized my house. It's interesting because we would call
Wow.
it bullying today, but back then it was just, you just weren't very well liked. You know what I mean? So we have kind of different terminology today. And it wasn't as extreme. We didn't have, Facebook wasn't a thing, that online stuff, but it was all very much in person to my face.
Yeah.
I just felt like, no one wanted to go to the dance with me. No one really wanted to hang out with me. It was just not a great season. And so, you go to college and all of a sudden things shift and change. And all of a sudden, here's somebody who really wants to be with me. And especially after that previous relationship where this person was embarrassed of me, literally, to have someone who was proud of me and wanted to be with me and had that desire, it was like I would crawl over broken glass for that. We
Mm,
all have this innate desire to be wanted. It's just
mm,
built into our DNA as humans. And
yeah.
and he was displaying that.
Yeah.
It's really attractive.
So I've read that the like emotional abuse can be quite subtle. For you, how would you define it, and like what were the signs?
Yeah, I think emotional abuse to me, well, first of all, abuse in general is a pattern. People can say something mean. We all do things that we regret or say things that we regret, but abuse is a pattern. And the dangerous part about emotional abuse is that the pattern actually gets you to believe that you have caused what has been but what is being said to you. Well, I wouldn't have called you that name if you hadn't done X, Y, and Z. Well, I wouldn't have gotten angry if you hadn't done X, Y, and Z. The other thing about emotional abuse that is so damaging is these people get so close to you that they use some of those insecurities and those things that you've shared with them in those moments of vulnerability against you.
Mm,
Oh, maybe you really are crazy. Oh, maybe that's why they thought you were embarrassing. Oh, maybe that's why all these insecurities, they find a way to bring those up as a
yeah,
way to kind of use them as a weapon.
yeah.
And it's so subtle the way that they do it. And often when you call them out on it, it's like, well, I didn't say that. That's that gaslighting. Or
Mm,
you misinterpreted it. Or over time, it's, well, you deserved it. And see how
ooh,
that's kind of a progression. Well, I didn't say that. Well, you misunderstood me. You deserved it. And by the
mm.
time we're over here, we actually believe we deserved it.
Yeah. That is so interesting because while you're speaking, it triggered a memory for me. So we used to live next to like our old neighbors. We could hear them arguing all the time. It was like paper thin. And I remember one time it was so bad. He said to her, "It's not all in your head. Everyone does hate you." And I
Yes.
remember, so what you just said was they'll use your insecurities that you share with them against you, and that just triggered that. And for me, when I heard that, I mean, my boyfriend will attest, I genuinely got out of bed and I went and knocked on the door. They didn't
Yep.
answer, but I was like, "You're okay. Like, I'm here."
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, in hindsight, like that's probably dangerous for her, dangerous for just me. Like,
No, actually, I mean, we had several neighbors call the cops. I had several neighbors that afterwards came up and gave me a key and told me if you need a safe place to stay. I mean, so I actually, do it in a
whoa.
safe way, but I think there really is value for that person that's trapped in that cycle to know, hey, somebody outside of this doesn't think this is okay.
Mm. And so when you were handed the key by that neighbor, was that after one event, or do you think they had experienced
Oh yeah,
multiple?
they had experienced it was kind of like you. She was actually downstairs, but could hear what was going on downstairs. And so
Wow.
after we'd been living there maybe 2 or 3 months before she came up and gave me the key,
Whoa. Okay. So for
she knew.
you, she knew. And in that moment when she gave you the key, what was your reaction? Were you
Oh, I was
grateful?
shocked. I couldn't even understand like why. And
Mm.
then it really made me think, is this that bad? Like I
Mm.
thought we just fought. I didn't realize. this had gone to a level where somebody outside of this was going, there is a major problem.
Mm. So do you think that was a pivotal moment for you?
It absolutely was. In hindsight, it was like that was eye-opening. And it did start, it got my wheels turning to think, you know what, maybe something's not quite right here. Maybe this isn't just a typical we argue moment, or
Yeah.
we're not just in a rough patch. There might be something bigger here. I
Yeah.
still didn't have a name for it, but it definitely got my wheels turning that something might not
Yeah,
quite right.
a red flag.
Yeah.
So can you share what that was actually like? So, from what I've read, like there's different types of emotional abuse. So
Yeah.
there's gaslighting, um, which for people who don't know what that is, that's when your reality is denied. So like you mentioned, Carrie, oh that didn't happen. Like you're wrong. You've
Yep.
made that up. Other ones are shaming and blaming,
Yeah.
um, name calling, verbal abuse, isolating individuals from family members and friends, um, criticism, constantly arguing or opposing, withholding affection and attention. Do any of these ring a bell as well?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think they overlap very well too and really feed off of each other. And so, I mean, all of those, bring up specific memories and emotions within things that happen. And I think, one of the most confusing ones for me was the gaslighting, because there were definitely moments, and I don't recommend doing this necessarily, but I literally thought I was going crazy. So I would write down things that he had said, because later he would just straight up say, "Oh, I didn't say that." And so I
Mhm.
was like, no. And I needed a place to go back to just go, okay, Carrie, you're not losing your mind.
Yeah.
That actually was said. But then it was extra confusing because it was like, well, why would you deny that? Why wouldn't you
Yeah.
take ownership and responsibility? And where the danger is when you confront them with that, which is why,
Oh,
again, be really safe about how you kind of track that. But it was, I
yeah.
think for me, the biggest thing was it made me question not only my sanity in certain areas, but my value. Like,
Mm,
I really genuinely believed that I deserved to be treated that way, to be called those names, to not be able to be around people. I mean, I really felt like the consequences were not worth the actions. And by the end of it, I really did believe I was worthless, which keeps you
wow.
stuck in that cycle.
Yeah. So I guess some people who are so unfamiliar with this would say in this moment, well, why did you stay?
Yeah. I think part of it is I really genuinely loved him.
Mhm.
And I still do. I see all the good things and who he is created to be, and all of those positive things. And, at first, those negatives, they felt like the anomaly. And what abuse does is that cycle is so addictive because it convinces you that that really is the anomaly, that the bad behavior is an anomaly
Mm,
and it really won't happen again. There's that hope built into that cycle. And so, what happens is there's that incident, and then there's the honeymoon phase. And it's the I'm sorry's, or I will never do that again. Or, they know the things that are going to make you stay, like, okay, we'll finally go to counseling, or we'll finally go to church, or we'll finally do X, Y, or Z. And
mm,
so you're like, oh, good, things are actually changing this time. Like, there's hope. And then there's that tension building phase where you can't quite explain it, but something's different, and
yeah.
then the incident happens. And the reality is our brains are hardwired to handle trauma in survival mode, which means we can't process the rest of that cycle. All we're focused on is surviving. So we're focused on, here was the incident, I have to survive. Not, okay, let's really unpack what happened here.
What for you were the incidents? What did those look like? Were these the emotional abuse or were these the physical?
It's really interesting. I mean, the physical, I think so often when we hear physical abuse, we think, well, they didn't hit me. Well, physical abuse goes beyond that. I mean, it's strangling, it's pushing, it's shoving, it's preventing you from leaving a room, it's threatening physical harm. If someone has threatened physical harm, that's physical abuse.
Mm,
And it's interesting because for me, and in a lot of the studies that I've looked at and learned afterwards, it's actually the verbal and emotional abuse that leaves the most lasting psychological damage.
yeah. Because you don't know, like you said, what was real
Yeah.
and
Who am
maybe
I? Do
yeah,
I
and
have value? Is what and I think for me, like
mhm.
when I got out, someone could ask me how I felt about anything, and I wouldn't be able to tell you. I had no idea.
Wow.
And then I was terrified to tell you, because what if that becomes a
Mm.
weapon? Or what if I felt the wrong thing? Or what if I responded the wrong way? And so it's really immobilizing.
Oh, wow. Did you have fear that he would, if you told someone else, that it would get back to him and he would?
I was afraid of that. And I also really didn't have anyone to tell. I was pretty
Mm.
isolated during that season. I mean, intentionally so. In
Yeah.
hindsight, that isolation really is intentional.
Yeah.
And I think so often in that situation, people go, well, how can you just not see other people? Well, a lot of times there's consequences. Well, if you go see so and so, here's the punishment, is really kind of what gets laid out for a lot of victims. And so
Wow. The
it's like
punishment.
the
What?
punishment. So like,
Wow.
and it's always something that you're like afraid of or don't want to happen, or it's so extreme that the next time you're like, you know what, it's not worth going to see that person because I don't want to experience that.
Wow. So can you give us an example of what the punishment is?
Yeah, I think for everyone it's really different. One example, there's a lady I was working with, and the punishment was every time that she would go see a family member. So this was like her daughter, or her sister, like a close family member, just family, not even friends. This is just family. He would go out and he'd stay out all night, and she wouldn't know where he was. And he'd come home the next morning and
Wow.
wouldn't tell her what he did, wouldn't tell her where he'd been, wouldn't tell her what was going on. And so for her, it was like that punishment was not worth spending time. Or for other people, we see this a lot. A friend goes out with, their friends, and they're on their phone all night because if they don't reply immediately, all of a sudden they're in this crazy fight with their
Yeah.
significant other and they have to leave and go home. So it looks really different depending on how things are, but there's always kind of that like retribution piece. Well, you didn't do what I wanted, so here's the consequence.
Yeah, you even just saying those examples, like I just think of so many girls who I know who have those like constantly, like you said, needing to reply, the jealousy,
Yep.
almost like the ownership of you, that they need, like it's their right to know your every single movement.
Yes.
When did it start to get physical?
It wasn't until later. It really started to escalate over time. And I think, again, that's something that's so interesting about abuse is, as we kind of maybe even navigate certain areas or say, well, if I do this, maybe I can end the control in this area, things escalate. And depending on the abuser, for some people, there's a ceiling, even though it might not be a great ceiling. And for others, there just isn't, and it escalates and escalates and escalates, and that's how we end up seeing these things that are so catastrophic that happen on the news, because there's just not a ceiling. And it was over time, and I think it was as I began to kind of just say, like, I don't want to be treated this way, like, treat this, something's got to change. That was sort of when things escalated.
Yes, so that's what I read as well in the research. Sorry that all of this for me. I'm like the research, but
Research
it
is good, and honestly I wish
yeah,
more people did the research, because we
yeah.
don't know what we don't know.
Well, I actually found one of my friends found herself in a relationship like this, and so I did all the research that I could, and I even attended some like seminars to figure out how I could support her. And the
Yeah.
biggest thing they said, which was so sad, they just said there's actually nothing I could do because you can't convince them to leave because they need to come to that conclusion on their own. Um, and sometimes if you say things, they'll actually stop hanging out with you because uh yeah, it becomes like almost like dangerous for them. And then the last thing was they said the only thing you could do is not let their partner isolate you. So no matter how much she tries to pull away, like just be there for her. And it took so many tries for her to leave.
Yeah. I mean, the average is seven different times before someone actually leaves.
Wow. So for you in this experience, so it got physical, um, and then it also got sexually violent as well.
Yeah. And, I think we so often think, well, I'm in an intimate partner relationship, there can't be sexual abuse. Well, the reality is there can.
Mhm.
And you can absolutely be raped in an intimate partner relationship. No means no, even with, even if you're dating, even if you're married, even, no matter what that committed relationship looks like. And, I think a lot of times sex in that situation is used to degrade someone and to actually reduce their humanity instead of being something that's like beautiful and intimate between two people to sort of like bring you closer together. So it gets really distorted. It becomes a form of control instead of a form of intimacy.
Wow, and that was what you started to experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was used, it really was. It was used as a weapon, not when I wanted it, but only when he wanted it, or,
Yeah.
in ways that he wanted it, or things that I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
And then being told afterwards that no one would want me because of those things that happened. No one else would ever want you because of X, Y, or Z. And so, and again, I think it's just very it gets very twisted in our brains, and like our desire to enjoy that really changes when that happens, because all of a sudden it's not enjoyable anymore. That's like it's just another form of abuse.
Wow. So has that for you had like lasting
Oh
impacts?
yeah. Yeah, it honestly, I was really messed up in that area afterwards. It kind of became one of those things where it was like after that relationship, it was like, well, this is the only way to give somebody what they want, or the
Oh,
only, one of the like, and it got really messy that way. And then with Joey, the thing that's been so healing is, he'd come home from a trip, or even just like, come home in general, and I'd be like, all right, let's do this thing, and he'd be like, whoa, 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 Carrie, like, I just want to talk to you for a few minutes first.
ooh,
He wanted to
yeah.
like know me. And then
Yeah.
on top of that, if I ever said, I don't like that, or I'm not comfortable, he even asked, what do you like? What makes you like, he has never once pushed me
Yeah.
to do something. And it's not, it's so different. I don't even know how to like, it's
Yeah.
been so healing, but that took time.
Yeah. And had do you have PTSD from that?
I really did. It's gotten better. I think some of the other stuff that I do, it's more like at this point, I mean, I'm 10, 11 years post, and I've done a lot of healing.
Mm.
But, a couple years ago, right before COVID, I was in an airport, and the last time I had been in that airport was with my ex. And I got off the plane. I hadn't even thought about that when I
Yeah.
booked my flight. I got off the plane, and all of a sudden I had a huge panic attack.
Ooh, yeah.
And it was like I was right back in that moment. So things still come up and trauma still comes up. But I mean, for the most days, I'm fine. But there's those moments that you can't prepare for where it's like,
Yeah.
you're just remembering that.
Oh my
But really, it's
God.
been very healing. I would say like the first 6 months that Joey and I were married, that was really hard. And then it's been significantly better.
Wow. Oh my God. So taking it back to being in this relationship, when did you say to yourself, okay, enough is enough. Like, I deserve better than this?
It wasn't all at once. It was over time. And I think one of the key moments for me was my dad, who's amazing and awesome and my best friend, aside from Joey. At that time, though, I wasn't communicating with my family. And they didn't know where I was living. They didn't know what was going on.
Oh,
It was like,
wow.
it was a whole thing. And so my dad finally was like, hey, I know that you need new tires on your car. Will you just meet me and I'll buy you new tires? And like, what fresh out of college kid does not want free new tires? Because those
Yeah.
things are ridiculously expensive. So I was like, fine, for free tires, I will meet my dad and I'll just lie to my ex about where I'm going. And so I met my dad, and my dad gave me a list of 10 truths about who I was. He didn't know the extent of what was going on. He knew something was very wrong, but he gave me that list. And I almost didn't take the paper because I was like, you tricked me. Like, this is not about tires. You had a message or whatever, but I took it. And it was really interesting because after that moment, I would find myself, we'd get in a fight or something would happen, and I'd find myself going into the bathroom and pulling out that list. And probably after about, the 60th time of reading through it, I started to go, well, maybe that could kind of be true, or maybe that used to be true,
Mm.
or I want that to be true. And over time, it was really things like that that began to help me realize, you know what, this isn't what I was designed for. This isn't what I was created to be.
Yeah. Whoa. I actually like that pricked the back of my eyes hearing that your dad handed you that letter because
Yeah.
he would clearly knew something was going on and that he could hand you back your self-worth was his
Yeah.
hope.
Yep.
Wow, and that you'd have that to hold on to.
Yeah.
What was on that list?
Yeah, it was, I mean, literally just 10 character traits about me. Like you're loved, you're wanted, you're valuable, you're smart. None of them were physical. It was all character traits about who I was. And I think, my dad wrote a book called The Blessing, which I had the privilege to get to be a part of. And that's really what it's about. It's speaking those words of life over somebody. And it's those unique character traits, the unique ways that people are made. I mean, I think he had one in there that said that I was just full of joy and like, in life and light. And like none of that was true in that season, but he knew that to be true of who I was.
Wow. Shout out to your dad.
Yeah, he's the best. He seriously is. I'm so
Wow.
lucky.
So in that moment, you held on to those. But I can't, that's so crazy that like you were scared to even see your family.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So it took time. I think from what I read about your experience, how many times did it take to leave?
I don't even know. I mean, at least
Yeah,
7.
at
At
least
least
7.
7. Yeah,
Okay.
if not more. And
Yeah.
and even if I left for a little bit, I mean, like we even got divorced and I moved back in later. So, I mean, like that's how addictive that cycle is.
Yeah.
Because I wanted so badly to believe that he had changed, and
Mhm.
that love, and then again that cycle, when we're not able to really pause and address trauma, we often end up repeating it.
Yeah.
And that's really what happened.
So it's so interesting because I know a lot of people have experienced like the argument side and maybe
Yeah.
less so like the physical. So they might be listening to this thinking, "Oh, well, it's probably not that bad." But,
Yeah.
even if you have a couple things on this list that you can relate to, maybe that's a telltale sign of
Yeah,
needing
absolutely.
to maybe think about your relationship and I
Yeah,
guess
do some more homework, dig into it a little bit.
yeah.
I someone gave me a book when I was in the middle of all of this called The Verbally Abusive Relationship. It's a great book. Highly recommend reading it, especially if you're someone that's going, maybe this is happening. I underlined literally almost the entire book, read it 3 times and was still going, well, it couldn't possibly be abuse. It couldn't. There's no way that that's actually what's happening.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to get it from your head into your heart of like, this is actually happening. And this person is choosing to do this. They are
Yes.
choosing to do that. And that's a
Yeah.
really hard, connection cognitively to make.
So I always am so curious, like, do these people like read some kind of guidebook on how to like
Crazy.
manipulate people?
No, it's
Seriously.
when I read that book, it was verbatim. It was literally verbatim. And I work with women all over the country and some outside of the country, and it is verbatim the things that they say and do. I don't know. I mean, I think it's like a spirit. I think there's some type of like, spirit, but I also think manipulation works. People,
Mm.
they figure out what works, and they figure out that thread of manipulation, and then they just find new ways to live it out.
Yeah. Do you think it's also, I mean, for me, I definitely think it's probably passed down. It's learned
Yeah, there's
behavior.
learned behavior. Where they learned it, I think, that's the part that's interesting. So, like for example, like my ex-husband, his family's incredible. That wasn't a part of their home. But there
Really?
was abuse somewhere else in his past that I think stemmed some of that. And then how he learned to cope was that way. You know what I
Mm.
mean? And so where they learn that behavior, it might not necessarily be what they grew up with, but somewhere along the way, something happened and their way of dealing with that was destructive. And for any of us, I
Yes.
mean, any of us can deal with something in a healthy way or a destructive way, but usually it's just destructive to us, not to
Mm.
the people around us. You know what I mean?
Yes. And one thing that I've like read is the crux of what keeps people holding on for so long is this idea that you can fix them and they
Yeah,
can be fixed.
absolutely. And again, like I said, I mean, I loved him. And now it's a very different kind of love, but I still love him. I still want to believe I still believe the best in who he is. And I believe if, that there's hope in a future for him if he really wants that. But at the time, I thought, well, I can change him, or if I just change my behavior, he won't respond that way. So
That's it.
either way,
Yeah.
I'm in control. And
Yeah.
really it's codependence. That's really kind of just that trademark codependence. Again, there's an awesome book called Codependent No More that I highly recommend. I think everyone needs to read it. But it really kind of just shows that, oh, well, I can fix everything around me. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh my God. The codependence is so interesting. What kind of signs are codependence? Like, what does that look like?
It's basically, I think at the end of the day, I mean, I think codependency is a lack of boundaries. And boundaries are a beautiful thing that give us back so much life and balance.
Yeah. So, is that what it started with for you? Did you start setting boundaries with your ex, or did you just like,
Every
did
time I tried, things escalated. And, I think a lot of people in that situation find that to be true as well, where you escalate, like you set a boundary and things either escalate or they pivot. And but there are some cases where you set a boundary and it changes, or in a healthy relationship, you set a boundary and it changes. And so, really, for me, I think there was just this realization that it was never going to change.
Mm,
He
yeah.
had made the choice that it was not going to change.
Yeah.
And so, my choices were stay and end up God knows where. I mean, honestly, I really feel like I would have ended up like, I don't think I would have lived through it. Like personally, I don't think I could have handled emotionally like living through that. Um, or you get out. Those are your choices.
Wow. What did leaving for the final time look like for you?
Yeah. I think for me, when you leave, I think the most important thing to understand is that that is when things can escalate. And it's actually the most dangerous time for somebody. And, that's when we hear, unfortunately, those stories on the news about, she left and he found her and all of those things. And so my biggest advice is get to a place of safety, but have a plan in place first. And for me, the plan was I'm just going to get out. And thankfully, I was able to get to a different state and I was able to put some distance between us. And that really kind of helped facilitate what was going on. And I know that that's not an option for everybody. But really, if you're planning to get out, spend 10 minutes, call the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and have someone help you put together a plan. Because it might not be going to your family's house if that's a place where they know you would go. It might be you need to let some other people in on what's going on so that they can plan for their own safety. It might, whatever that plan, you might need to have some money set aside. Whatever the plan is, it's really smart to talk through it with a professional, so that you can do it in the safest way possible.
Wow. I think that's pretty life-saving advice for anyone who's listening out there. I guess it would be great to know, are there any other tips other than just being there for a friend? How can people support others who are going through this?
Yeah, I mean, being there for a friend, I mean, I will say, as someone who is now on this side of it and who, I mean, I do coaching, I help people that are in this situation. You have to have boundaries as a friend because it is kind of like a yo yo, sometimes where you're like, I thought they saw what was going on and now they're back. I think two pieces of advice would be that yo yo effect is happening because of the trauma. And that abuse cycle, when they start hearing all those promises again, and again they're living in that state of fight or flight, they can't process beyond that that incident and survival. And so that's where, again, as a friend, you're going to be like, okay, wait a minute, yesterday you were ready to call the police or file, and today it's not a big deal. Like, I do not understand. And so be aware that that's that abuse cycle and that survival mode kicking in them. So know that, because that can kind of help take out some of the, oh my gosh, I'm feeling crazy. I'm feeling crazy watching you go through this. The other side would just be there as you can. And I think you did a great job of that. I'm going to be there as I can, maybe make them a list of 10 truths about who they are. Again, it doesn't necessarily have to be pointing out to them everything that's going wrong in their relationship, but pointing out truth about who they are, about what they deserve, about their value, about how they were created, because those are really the things that are being attacked. And if you can kind of be the antidote to that, that's really powerful.
That is seriously good advice. I haven't heard that one yet, of reminding someone the truth of who they are. Whoa. Okay. And I guess the final question is, you've given such amazing advice of, the safety plan, but for someone who's really in the thick of it, what advice would you give to them?
I think my biggest advice is you have a choice and it does not have to look this way. And you don't deserve to be treated this way. There's nothing you did to cause this, and there's nothing you can do to undo it. I think the other thing I would just say is, like I said, I mean, it's been 10 plus years since I've been out, and I can't even describe to you the blessing and the way that life looks now. It's completely different. And I know that that is possible for you. And it's if it happened to me, it can happen to anyone. It's not exclusive. And that type of future is possible for you. It's just taking one little step forward, just one little step forward.
Wow. Well, thank you so much, Carrie, for sharing your journey with us and your experience. It sounds like you're doing incredible work. Is there any way people can reach out and get the counseling from you?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I do offer coaching, and you can go to carrietrent.com, and you can find out all that on there, or Carrie Trent Stageberg on Instagram, and find out as well. And yeah, I would be honored to get to help any way that I can, or connect you with somebody else who, can help you walk through this season.
Cool. Well, thank you so much and have a good one.
Thank
Bye.
you.